This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Riley Smith.
Well, good day and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Riley Smith. Today is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. It's Groundhog Day, and we're so glad you could join us for today's show. In today's episode of Ag Matters PM, I talk with Meaghan Anderson, an Extension Field Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. We also have a check of that Ag Weather Outlook, but first, let's run down the markets.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
Well, we're at the end of another trading day in the ag marketplace, and for a bit of analysis, we go to Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net. First off, Robin, what have we seen going on in the grain markets today?
Well, what we saw was a divergence really in the soybeans to corn. You could say soybeans to wheat as well. Now, when we first of all started off the day, we were looking at export sales. But export sales wouldn't have suggested that in themselves. Corn was at 62.7 million bushels. That was up 75% from the previous week. But the thing on the corn side of it was the shipments. Shipments were at 23.6 million bushels. What we need is 46.1 million on a weekly basis. So that actually ended up being the I think probably a little bit more of the negative side of that market. We are continuing to see those lower export sales or shipments, I should say. Now, on the soybean side, you would think, again, the opposite there. We saw export sales of 27 million bushels. That was down 36% from the previous week. But when we looked at shipments, they were at 72 million bushels, and what we need is 22 million for the year, or for the week, I should say, in order to match the goal that's set there. So we saw a real dynamic there between those two, and that set the stage for a lot of what was going on during the day. So on the wheat side, that was at 5 million bushels, down 73% from the previous week. Shipments were at 18.2 million bushels, close to the goal of 18.7. So wheat was kind of a little bit more of a follower, I would think. It was down significantly for a while today, but right around the noon hour on Central Time, the market really started coming back again. So I think some of the wheat does what wheat does. There was probably some short covering came in, a little bit of concern over some of the continued dryness in the plains. Now, corn use for ethanol was at 425.3 million bushels for the month of December, down 11% from a year earlier. But on the other side of that spectrum, which, is a longer term thing we have to look at, the agribusiness company Green Plains with energy infrastructure company Tallgrass inked a deal with United Airlines to develop a full-scale alcohol to jet fuel production from ethanol by 2028. I mean, that's a huge thing. It would supply up to 130 million gallons per year of this mixture with ethanol to American Airlines by 2028. Now, obviously, that's a longer-term situation. It didn't really have much of an impact on that market. That was announced late yesterday. But it is a real positive thing as far as agriculture is concerned. Now, when we're looking at Argentina, again, that's always been in the news. There's a current cool front in there, but then we're going to look at 7 to 10 days of more of the dryness again. And their soybean crop now is estimated at 36 million tons, according to the Foreign Ag Service, and that's a 9.5 million tons amount below what USDA initially forecast. So we did see the bean strength today. We saw the weakness in corn and wheat just kind of went along in between and closed just slightly higher. So we had the dynamic between beans, corn, and wheat was just kind of holding its own.
All right, Robin, and what have we seen on the other side of the marketplace in the livestock complex?
Well, we really saw a fire lit under the livestock complex today. We saw live cattle move to new contract highs across the board. I think it's a delayed reaction to the bullish cattle inventory report. Typically, a lot of times I've seen in these markets, especially the cattle market, where the first day it trades the opposite, second day it trades the report, and we followed that almost to a T again this time after the report. Now, export sales were good at 25,200 metric tons. China was the third largest buyer, South Korea the largest buyer. So we did see some good sales there. Again, the making new contract highs probably is pulling more buyers back into that market again. Technical traders, fundamental traders. Box beef showed promise today with the noon report. We had choice up 11 cents, select up 68 cents. We have been seeing some pressure on box beef since the beginning of the year. Not saying that today is really going to be a turning point, but at least rather than seeing a continued slowing of box beef, we did see some strength in that market. Moving over into the pork side of the equation, export sales were 30,900 metric ton. Mexico was the largest buyer. China wasn't really listed, but they had their Lunar New Year last week, so that was really kind of expected they wouldn't be in there. Now, the interesting situation is yesterday they got hit really hard and they went down to touch support and bounced off of that at the end of the day. And today they really found some strength again to propel that market higher. Now, we had two combinations today. In the morning reports, we had cash up strongly. It was up $2.43, which we haven't seen that for quite a while, to see that kind of a strength, especially coming in on a Thursday. Normally we see more strength on Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the cutout values at noon were up $2.86. So both of that combination, along with good export sales and bouncing off of the technical support yesterday, just lit a fire under that market too. And it is going to struggle because it is in this more of a bearish mode yet, but maybe we're starting to see a level here where we'll find some support.
Well, Robin, great analysis today as always. For those of our listeners who would like to get in touch and learn more from the folks at agmarket.net, how can they do that?
They can call me directly at 877-256-3253, or they can go to our website, agmarket.net. The phone number's on there. You can pick up the phone. There'll be somebody ready and willing to work with them.
Great talking with you as always, Robin, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
All right, thank you.
That again was Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net. Let's go ahead and take a look at how those numbers close. That's courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. March corn is down 5 3/4 at $6.75 1/4. December new crop down 1 1/4 at $5.95 even. March soybeans up 14 even at $15.34 1/4. November new crop up 10 1/4 at $13.70 1/2. March soybean meal up 7.10 at $4.91.80. Soybean oil up 15 at $60.94. Chicago wheat up 1 1/4 at $7.61 even. Minneapolis spring wheat down 3 1/2 at $9.22 1/2. Kansas City hard red wheat down 3 1/2 at $8.80 3/4. March oats down 3 3/4 at $3.89 1/4. On the Merc, February live cattle up 132 at $159.75. March feeders up 267 at $185.92. February lean hogs up 137 at $75.35. Pork cutout up 162 at $82.95. February class 3 milk up 3 cents at $17.93. And that's been a check of the markets here on Ag Matters PM. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, I talk with Iowa State University Extension Field Specialist Meaghan Anderson. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Riley Smith. A couple weeks ago, I was at the Practical Farmers of Iowa conference in Ames, and I had the chance to talk with Extension Field Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, Meaghan Anderson. We had a conversation about how residuals from herbicide application can affect, later on in that same growing year, the cover crops that you might choose to plant. Well, we are here at the Practical Farmers of Iowa conference here at Iowa State University, talking with Meaghan Anderson, Extension Field Agronomist with Iowa State University. First off, Meaghan, obviously you had a big, long discussion on how herbicides and the residuals can affect cover crops in the same crop season. So let's just talk about some of the things that producers need to watch out for and consider when they're applying those herbicides, and then if they want to have a cover crop later on.
Yeah, so when we're using a cover crop during the same growing season as we're applying residual herbicides, hoping to get good weed control early, but also still allow a cover crop to establish, that always presents a challenge because the herbicides are not going to necessarily discern between a good cover crop and a bad weed. So we always need to keep in mind, are we sort of planning our herbicide program ahead of time for a cover crop to be seeded, or do we need to plan our cover crops based on the herbicides that we've applied? And so there's a lot of things to sort of pack into that, considering the herbicide products we're choosing and the rates, considering the cover crop species that we'll be using, and considering the environmental conditions, and then the time frame from maybe when we use that herbicide to the time at which we're going to be seeding it.
Right, and you talked during the discussion on just how there's a difference between maybe if you're going to use that later on for grazing fields, or if that's just going to have a crop in the next year. So what are some of the main differences between that on how you would manage that herbicide application?
Yeah, so the big concern with the cover crop is what's your intended use with that cover crop, right? So if we are seeding a cover crop with the intention to graze or harvest it, where that cover is actually going to be leaving the field, then we need to be keeping in mind those herbicides that we have applied prior to the cover crop and what kind of restrictions they have on them, because most of them are going to have rotational restrictions that are going to really narrow down maybe the cover crop species that you can legally seed after a certain time frame following that herbicide application. So that grazing is a key point that we need to make sure to be paying attention to the herbicides that we're choosing if we're intending to graze it later in the season.
And obviously there's a big thing during the discussion as well, but the primary thing is to just check your label when it comes to herbicide management there, right?
Yeah, that's always it's kind of a joke, right? But it's the truth. Check your labels, because the label is the law.
So it's kind of a balancing act, picking whether or not you need to manage the herbicide first, the cover crop. Do you need to pick a different cover crop? What is usually the decision process there? Do farmers usually maybe pick a different herbicide first, or are they going to manage that cover crop?
I think it really is farmer dependent, right? There are some farmers who are very interested in things like maybe 60-inch rows and growing cover crops in that wide space between maybe corn plants or rows of corn. And they're maybe going to be looking at what cover or what herbicides can I choose to allow for establishment of these covers. I think most people, we have enough weed problems, at least here in Iowa, that we really need to be focused on, okay, what can I do to get good control of my weeds, and then what cover crops can I still establish in this system after I've taken care of the weeds that I have that are concerns.
Right, and there are even factors outside of just the herbicide management or the herbicide decision and then the cover crop. Big thing you mentioned was drought and how that can affect, whether or not that herbicide had a chance to wash away and get through the soil. We're in a pretty big drought right now. How is that going to affect decisions, especially for producers coming into this next year?
Yeah, so obviously the amount of rainfall that we have, as well as the temperatures that we have, are going to have very large effects on how quickly herbicides are going to break down in our system. And so we need to be keeping that in mind, especially in these areas of the state that we are drier. And so that's going to affect our choices for maybe how we apply herbicides next spring and how well they're actually going to work in our system. And they certainly could have effect locally based on the rainfall that we get next growing season, whether or not we're going to have a successful establishment of a cover crop. So something I always encourage people to do is to consider using a herbicide bioassay during that growing season, especially if we've been drier than you expect, right? We are able to collect a representative sample of soil, seed some representative seeds of species that we would like to grow out there, along with maybe one that we think for sure will grow, and just let those grow in a nice sunny warm spot for maybe a month and observe them, right? See whether or not those cover crops are actually going to be able to germinate in this soil and grow, or do we need to be looking at something else?
And then what would producers say they do a test like that, or they're even just looking at their fields? What do they need to be looking for on those cover crops to tell, if there has been an effect from the herbicides on that plant?
Absolutely. In most cases, your cover should germinate, or at least if they don't germinate, it's not going to be like an entire field of a dead cover crop or something that never germinated. It should be spotty, maybe based on soil type, perhaps based on overlap areas in a field. And then, of course, on the plants in like a bioassay or in the field, we always want to be looking for things like typical herbicide symptoms, right? So depending on the herbicides you've used, yellowing is often a very common symptomology. We may see some burning of leaf tips, but it usually is somewhat consistent to a particular area or in that bioassay and would be consistent to a species. And so we just want to keep an eye out for those symptoms.
And then are there just certain cover crops that might give producers an easier time when it comes to that? They might be a little more hardy and give less issues?
Yeah, absolutely. There are certainly cover crops that we view as being more tolerant to lots of things. Cereal rye is by far the most tolerant, it seems like, to a lot of the herbicides we use. And conveniently, at least here in Iowa, it's one of the most tolerant to our cold Iowa winters as well. So if you're trying to get started in cover crops, or you want something that you're at least much more likely to be successful with, we always encourage starting with something like cereal rye.
All right, well, obviously, a lot of information that's tough to cram into one interview, so if our listeners and our viewers would like to learn more about this herbicide management and just kind of balancing that with their cover crop choices, where could they find more information?
Certainly, they could reach out to me or any of our extension field agronomists with Iowa State, and we'd be happy to lead you in the right direction.
All right, Meaghan, well, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you.
That again was Meaghan Anderson, an extension field specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. As for right now, let's go ahead and take a look at that ag weather outlook. Today, there's really no complaints for the weather as we have pretty clear skies, sunny conditions, and these temperatures aren't too bad either. It just feels like a nice wintry day. Now, as we look at tomorrow, we're looking at colder temperatures, pretty cold in some parts of the state with that wind chill. But otherwise, after that, it looks like we're going to be sitting in the 30s and 40s for a little while. So once again, not too much to complain about. So let's see what the National Weather Service has in store for the next 24 hours. As you can see from the National Weather Service, we've got those cold temperatures coming back in for just a little bit. Today we have mostly sunny skies and blustery conditions, highs ranging from the upper teens to low 30s. Tonight we have mostly clear skies as the windy conditions persist, and there is a wind chill advisory in some parts of the state. Lows overnight should range from about negative 13 to 4 degrees. And tomorrow it'll be partly to mostly sunny and cold. Highs will range from the single digits to the upper 20s. And taking a look at the affiliate weather map for tomorrow, Cherokee will be partly cloudy with a high around 13. Shenandoah will be sunny with a high around 28. Des Moines mostly sunny and 16. Waterloo pretty cold. We have mostly sunny skies and 8 degrees. Albia partly cloudy and 18, and Clinton will see much of that cold weather again with partly cloudy skies and a high around 7. For more detailed forecasts in your part of the state, make sure to check in with your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate. And that's been a check of the Ag Weather Outlook, and that also brings us to the end of this episode of Ag Matters PM. You can find all of our content on our website at iowaagnet.com. You can also follow us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And you can find all of our video content as well as previous episodes of AMPM on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notification button to see when those videos go live. Don't forget as well our free Twice Daily Market podcast on Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Riley Smith. On behalf of Mark Magnuson and Dustin Huffman, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.